I watched my son-in-law grab my elderly wife's wheelchair and pull it backward in front of 200 wedding guests. The next second, she crashed onto the cold marble floor. I rushed beside her and shouted, "Are you okay? Please look at me." But he calmly said, "She just lost her balance." Then a family member stood up and yelled, "No, I saw you pull that chair." The entire ballroom went silent. My daughter stepped forward, holding a folder of evidence, and whispered, "Do you want everyone here to know the truth?" I will never forget the sound. Not the music that had drifted through the room all evening, a jazz trio working through a Tony Bennett medley near the windows. Not the champagne flutes chiming against each other, not the low murmur of 200 people making conversation over chicken marsala and carved roast beef. None of that left a mark on me. What stayed was the sound of Gloria's wheelchair tipping sideways, the squeal of rubber against marble, and then that horrible hollow thud of her shoulder meeting the floor of the Harbor View Pavilion ballroom, while 200 people stood and watched and did not move. Welcome back to Grandpa's Revenge, the place where the stories that matter most finally get told. If these stories have ever moved you or made you feel less alone, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and hit that like button. It helps more people find their way here. And while you settle in, are you driving somewhere, cooking supper, or maybe just resting after a long day? Tell me below. Now, a quick note, some elements of this story have been shaped for storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to specific real people or events is purely coincidental. What matters is the truth at the heart of it. My body moved before my brain did. These knees, 68 years old, ground down by decades of arthritis, gave out the moment I tried to lower myself beside her, and I landed half sideways, one palm slapping against the marble to stop myself from going all the way down. The cold of the stone bit straight through my dress shirt. I could feel every groove in it. Gloria's eyes were open. First thing I checked, brown eyes. Those same brown eyes I'd woken up to every morning for 41 years. Still open, still blinking and locked on me, not drifting to the ceiling above. Not pulled toward the crowd pressing in around us. On me, only me. I'm here. The words came out broken nothing like my own voice. Right here, sweetheart. Don't move. Don't you try to move. Her lips pressed tight. Her left hand, the one that still had some obedience in it, slid across the marble and closed around my wrist. She held harder than I would have thought she could. She always did. Then came my son-in-law's voice from somewhere behind me. "She fell," Grant said, easy as a man commenting on the weather. "I'm not sure what everybody's staring at. She lost her balance, that's all." The jazz trio had gone quiet. I couldn't say at what point that happened, but the absence of sound was enormous. The kind that doesn't just fill a room, it presses against the walls. 200 people stood in that ballroom, and not a single one spoke. Near the entrance doors, I heard the faint click of a phone camera shutter. Then a second, then 20. She did not fall. Aunt Loretta's voice came through the room like something sharp. She was already standing at the family table, 62 years old, and carrying the very specific fury of a woman who had made a 4-hour drive from Louisville to witness her sister-in-law thrown from her wheelchair at her own daughter's wedding. "You dragged that chair back. I watched every second of it. Nobody asked you, Loretta. And don't you Loretta me." She pointed a finger at Grant that would have stopped traffic. "There are 200 people in here, and half of them already have their cameras on your face. Go ahead and keep talking." Grant's jaw went rigid. His gaze didn't drop to me, didn't go to Gloria on the floor. It swept the room instead, reading it, measuring it. Even in that moment, he was calculating the odds. That was when Audrey moved. She'd been 6 feet away. I hadn't seen her take a single step, but suddenly she stood directly between Grant and Gloria's wheelchair. And when she spoke, her voice was the softest sound in the room. "Grant," just his name said, the way you'd read a name off a court filing. No warmth, no anger either. And somehow that was worse. "Do you want everyone here to know the truth?" Something shifted in Grant's face. The smooth ease he'd worn all evening began to fracture the way old paint splits along a cold wall. "Audrey, because I have everything." She didn't lift her voice even a fraction. She didn't have to. Every transfer, every receipt, every email you sent to the venue coordinator asking for a different billing description. The bank logs showing which device approved, which transaction down to the timestamp. A slight tilt of her head. "I'm going to ask you one final time. Does everyone in this room hear the truth tonight? Or do you step aside and let a paramedic reach my mother? The whole room seemed to stop breathing. Gloria's grip tightened on my wrist. I looked down at her. Her jaw was firm. Her eyes were clear and dry. She was watching Grant with a look I hadn't seen on her face in 2 years, the same look she used to wear in parent-teacher conferences, when a teacher tried to sell her something she knew wasn't true, still steady waiting for the other person to run out of road. Even here, lying on the floor of her daughter's wedding, in her good dress, a bruise already spreading across her left shoulder, she knew exactly what was coming next. What I didn't yet understand was how many months she'd been waiting for it. I leaned close so only she could hear me. I need to say something to you. I should have been paying closer attention. I should have caught this sooner. Gloria, I'm so sorry. She moved her eyes from Grant to me. Her left thumb traced across the back of my hand, once then again, the same small gesture she used on long car trips when the children were asleep behind us. And she'd reach over across the gear shift just to let me know everything was all right. It was as close as she could get to the words, I know. We'll be okay. But to make sense of how we ended up on that floor at the Harbor View Pavilion, and why my daughter stood over us carrying 41 months of financial records in her head, I need to go back 6 weeks. A Tuesday in October, a kitchen table in Riverside, and a bank statement I came within a breath of not opening. 6 weeks earlier, I was at that table at 11:00 at night, doing what I'd done every month for 30 years, working through the statements. Gloria was asleep. After 10, the house got quiet in a way that had its own texture. That particular hush of a home built around someone's recovery. The medical equipment running its low, constant hum, a sound you stop registering after enough weeks. Every settling groan of the walls arriving louder than it should. Cold coffee at my elbow, a yellow legal pad filling with figures that all reconcile neatly until one didn't. The reimbursement check was what snagged my attention. $200 from the insurance company made out to Grant Riordan. Memo line accessibility equipment, reimbursement, Sheridan residence. I put my pen down. I had paid for that wheelchair ramp out of my own account. 8 months back, $4,600 to a contractor named Hank Dempsey, who'd pulled up on a Monday with 2 men and a truckload of lumber and had the job wrapped by Thursday. The invoice sat in my filing cabinet in the hallway. I'd signed the check myself. I'd stood at the window and watched Hank drive away. I called Grant. 2 rings and he picked up, and that alone should have registered. 11 o'clock at night, and he answered as though he'd had one eye on the phone all evening. Hey, Pop. He only used that word when he was working an angle, or when something had him rattled. 4 years of Sunday dinners, Thanksgiving tables, birthday celebrations, where he somehow drifted into the center of every photo. I knew that much about him. Everything all right? I'm going through the bank statement, I said. There's an insurance reimbursement for the wheelchair ramp. $200. It landed in your account, Grant. A pause, half a second, not long enough to be thinking, long enough to be choosing. Oh yeah. His voice eased out deliberately like a man releasing pressure from a valve. I handled the insurance forms for you a while back, remember. Took that off your plate. Since I filed everything, they must have routed the check to me by default. I'll move the money over this week, no big deal. A small, relaxed laugh. I paid Hank Dempsey $4,600 out of pocket, I said. 8 months ago. Right. Insurance only reimbursed $3,200, so you're still ahead on the difference. Don't worry about it, Pop. I'll handle it. My thumb dug into the phone casing. The feeling in my fingers wasn't anger, not yet. It was something more precise than that. The discomfort of a man who has built things with his own hands for 40 years and can tell by feel when something hasn't been set square. Grant, I want that money in my account by Friday. Absolutely Friday done. The words came too quickly, too frictionless. Get some sleep, it's late. Things are running hot with the wedding. Fiona's been losing her mind over the seating arrangements all week. Friday. I said once more flat and ended the call. I stayed at that table a while longer, hearing the refrigerator run and a single car pass somewhere out on the street. Then my eyes went back to the page. Down past the utility payments, the pharmacy line items, the grocery charges I could place without thinking until they stopped at something near the bottom. A merchant code I had never encountered. 4,500. The memo said, Home Services Consultation. I had no idea what Home Services Consultation was. I hadn't brought anyone in for home services. In the past 60 days, I hadn't approved any charge that size for anything I couldn't account for on the spot. The coffee had gone stone cold before I finally wrote that code down on my legal pad. I circled it twice with my pen and kept staring until the digits started swimming. I didn't call Audrey that night. She was already stretched thin, the job, the commute, the twice-weekly visits to check on her mother that she made without anyone having to ask. I told myself I'd look into it on my own first. Probably nothing. A billing error, a vendor label that got scrambled, something that would sort itself out by Friday when Grant returned the $200. I shut off the kitchen light and went to bed. Sleep didn't come. I didn't go near the bank statement when morning arrived. I made coffee and I looked in on Gloria. I walked her through her morning routine, the transfer from bed to wheelchair, the medications arranged on the bathroom counter in the exact sequence her doctor had prescribed, then breakfast. Wednesdays she wanted soft scrambled eggs with fresh chives stirred in, and toast cut into triangles because that was how her mother had always done it, and some things you simply don't disturb. I got through all of that before I went back to the kitchen table and picked up the legal pad with that circled merchant code. I typed it into the search bar the way you'd look up a takeout place. Results came back in under 2 seconds. Harbor View Pavilion, Burnham Harbor, Chicago. Premier wedding and event venue. Capacity up to 300 guests. Award-winning catering. Panoramic views of Lake Michigan. I sat without moving. The coffee mug was warm between my palms. Out the kitchen window, a city bus rolled past, and down the block, a dog was barking at something it had no hope of catching. $40, $500 billed to my account for a wedding venue. Grant and Fiona's wedding venue. I set the mug down before it slipped from my hands. My first instinct, and I'm not proud of it, but I won't soften. It was to find a version of events that made sense of this. Because Grant was family, because Fiona loved him, and Fiona was my daughter, my youngest. The one who used to drift off in the back seat on the drive home from soccer, the one who still called me without fail every Sunday morning. Because 41 years of working with my hands had taught me when something looks off. You check your level twice before you start tearing out walls. Maybe the venue had the wrong account on file. Maybe Grant had meant to use his own card and keyed in the wrong number somewhere. I picked up the phone. I didn't call Grant. I called Audrey. She answered on the third ring, a little breathless the way she always sounded at 8 in the morning, when she was already 20 minutes deep into something at her desk. "Morning, Dad. Everything all right?" "Is Mom?" "Your mother's fine," I said. "She's in the living room doing her PT. Audrey, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me straight." A brief quiet, not hesitation. Audrey didn't hesitate. It was the sound of her changing gears. "Okay, what is it?" "Do you know what the Harbor View Pavilion is?" The silence that came back was a different kind from before. This one had mass to it. "That's Grant and Fiona's wedding venue," she said, choosing her words with care. "Over at Burnham Harbor. Why are you asking, Dad?" "Because they ran a $4,500 charge to my account," I said. The merchant code showed up on last night's statement. I just identified it. 3 full seconds. I counted them. "Dad." Her voice dropped half a register. "Don't touch that account. Don't reach out to Grant. Don't move any money around and don't say anything to Mom yet. Can you do that?" "No, does it be?" Something tightened in my throat that I hadn't anticipated. "You already knew something wasn't right." "I've been looking at a few things for the past several weeks," she said. "I didn't want to say anything until I was certain. But this..." She stopped. I heard her let out a slow breath, the kind she forces out when she's keeping herself level. "This is bigger than I realized. I'm coming over tonight. 7 o'clock. Don't make dinner. I'll bring food." "Audrey," my voice came out rougher than I meant for it to. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks, she said. "Maybe 4. I'm sorry, Dad. I was trying to protect you." I looked through the kitchen doorway into the living room, where Gloria was working through her exercises. Slow, deliberate left arm raises the way Dr. Novak had shown her. Her jaw was tight with the effort. She caught me watching and gave me the small nod she used when she wanted me to stop hovering. "Your mother," I said quietly. "Does she know any of this?" "I don't know," Audrey said. "That's one of the things I need to figure out tonight." After I hung up, I stood at the counter without going anywhere for a long time. The search results were still open on my phone. Harbor View Pavilion panoramic views of Lake Michigan. I thought about the 4,500. I thought about the 3,200 Grant had promised back by Friday, which I was now fairly certain I'd never see. I thought about all those Sundays he'd sat at my table eating my food, asking about the Cubs calling me Pop. I thought about Fiona, who rang every Sunday morning and whose voice turned soft and warm whenever she talked about the wedding. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and went to sit with my wife. Audrey arrived at 6:45 with Thai food from the spot on Argyle Street that Gloria had loved before she got sick. Green curry pad, Cebu spring rolls still warm in the bag, and a manila folder so dense it had a rubber band stretched around it. She put the food on the counter and laid the folder on the table, and she looked at me with an expression she had inherited straight from her mother, calm on the surface, furious under it, and entirely clear on what needed to happen. Sit down, Dad," she said. "This is going to take a while." Gloria was already at the table, wheelchair positioned the way she always positioned herself, back straight, chin level, at the head of the table. Even with the right side of her body refusing to cooperate, she sat like a woman who expected to be heard. She watched Audrey open the folder and distribute papers across the surface without so much as a blink. "How long have you been building this?" I asked. "Since September." Audrey sorted the pages into 3 stacks with quick practiced hands, the same way she used to organize her homework in high school. "I noticed something off on one of the statements I was helping you sort after Mom's last hospital stay. A reimbursement that didn't correspond to any invoice I could locate. I didn't say anything because I wanted to be thorough." Thorough. My chest felt like something heavy had been set down on it. "Audrey, that was 2 months ago." "I know." She held my gaze without looking away. "I'm sorry. I needed to be sure before I brought it to you." She turned the first page toward me. It was a contractor's invoice, Hank Dempsey's invoice, the one I'd paid out of my own account for the wheelchair ramp. Beside it, she placed a second document, the insurance claim Grant had filed. The figures didn't match, and my stomach fell when I saw why. He submitted materials costs running 30% above what Hank actually charged, Audrey said. "I called Hank last week. He told me the job came in under estimate because lumber prices had dropped. Grant was on site when Hank gave the revised quote. He knew exactly what the job cost." "Grant knew all that," I said, hearing myself think it aloud. "He filed the original estimate anyway and kept the gap between the insurance payment and the real cost." She pointed to the reimbursement line. "That $3, $200 isn't the whole picture, Dad. It's just the part that was easy to notice." She moved to the second pile. I stared at the columns of figures, dates, amounts, merchant codes arranged in tidy rows, and the longer I looked, the more clearly the shape of it emerged. Small numbers first. $200 here, $350 there. Charges that could pass for groceries, a tank of gas, a copay, an errand, run on the way somewhere else. Nothing that would make a man stop and ask a question if he was busy and exhausted and using most of his attention on medication, schedules, and insurance authorizations, and learning how to help his wife get dressed without making her feel like she was being managed. Grant had understood exactly how depleted I was. He'd been banking on it. "When did this start?" I asked. My voice had a strange quality, flat and hollow, the way a room sounds when you've cleared out all the furniture. "August of last year," Audrey said. "Small amounts at first. Then in February, when the engagement was announced." She pointed to a figure on the page. The number had jumped. It had nearly tripled. Gloria's left hand came down on the table. Not hard. She couldn't manage hard anymore on that side, but deliberate. Her gaze moved from the papers to Audrey to me, and her jaw tightened the way it did when she was working to produce an expression her face no longer formed easily. "She knows," I said, not a question. "Mom." Audrey leaned in, her voice softer than it had been all evening. "Did you know something was wrong?" Gloria's left hand moved to the laminated communication board clipped to her wheelchair tray. Her finger traveled to a word and rested there. "Yes." The word landed somewhere behind my sternum. My eyes burned in a way I hadn't anticipated, and I pressed my knuckles against my mouth and looked at the ceiling for a moment because I was 68 years old and I was not going to come apart at my own kitchen table. "Why didn't you tell me?" I got out. Her finger moved again slowly, one letter at a time. T-R-I-E-D. I reached across and covered her hand with mine. Her fingers curled around 2 of mine and held. "Okay," I said. My voice broke on the word, and I let it. "Okay, we're going to make this right." Audrey was watching us both, her eyes bright, her jaw locked. She drew a breath through her nose and squared the papers into a neat stack. "There's more," she said, "but it can wait until after we eat." The food went cold while Audrey talked. After we finished eating, she spread the second and third piles across the table, and what had looked like a thick folder when she arrived had become something that covered every inch of the surface. Bank statements, insurance forms, contractor invoices, website printouts, all of it organized by date with colored tabs, the same way Audrey had organized her school binders since she was 12 years old. I used to tease her about it. Gloria used to tell me to leave her alone because some people just needed things in order. Gloria was right as usual. Tonight those colored tabs were the only reason any of it was navigable. "Start from the beginning," I said. "All of it." Audrey nodded. She drew the first page from the earliest section, August of last year, and placed it in front of me. "It begins small," she said. $240 labeled as pharmacy supplies. "Do you remember approving anything like that in August?" I thought back. August of last year. Gloria had just returned from her second inpatient stay. I'd been running on 4 hours of sleep a night. Learning to operate the hospital bed, we'd rented fielding calls from insurance adjusters, piecing together the home health aide schedule. Grant had offered to help with the paperwork. He'd sat at this exact table with his laptop out and said, "Pop, let me take this off your plate. You've got enough to deal with." "No," I said. "I don't remember authorizing that." "He ran it through as a reimbursement claim," Audrey said, "small enough that it wouldn't trigger a review. Then 2 weeks after that, another charge, $180, framed as a gas mileage reimbursement for driving Mom to an appointment." "He drove her once," I said. My back teeth pressed together hard enough that my jaw ached. "In September, once." "He billed for 6 trips," Audrey said. Her voice held steady, but her left hand was flat on the table. Her tell for when she was working hard to keep herself even. Over 4 months, he submitted 11 separate mileage reimbursements for appointments that either you took Mom to or the medical transport service handled. I pulled the transport records and matched them against the dates on his claims. The kitchen felt like it had shrunk. The refrigerator hum seemed to fill more of the room than it should have. I stared at the page in front of me, those clean columns of dates and dollar amounts, and I thought about how I had handed Grant my insurance login, my account password, the key to the filing cabinet in the hallway, and said, "Thank you, son. I don't know what I'd do without you." "How much altogether?" I asked. Audrey turned to the final page in the folder. At the bottom, circled in red pen, was a number, $134,000. It sat on the page like something with physical weight. I read it 3 times. I looked up at Audrey, then I looked at Gloria, who was watching me with her chin level and her eyes dry. And I understood from the steadiness of her gaze that this figure was not news to her. She had known. She had been holding this inside a body that couldn't carry it to me, and she'd been holding it for a long time. "When did the amounts jump?" I asked, my voice coming out lower than I'd meant. "February," Audrey said. She turned to the section marked with the red tab. "The week after the engagement announcement, the charges went from hundreds to thousands. Venue deposits, catering prepayments, florist contracts, all routed through a business account I didn't recognize at first." She pulled out a single sheet and set it down in front of me. "Mercer Home Solutions, LLC. I read the name twice. "Vance," I said. "Grant's cousin." Audrey confirmed it. He had formed the LLC 8 months ago. No physical address, no employees, no registered business activity, just a bank account that pulled money from my accounts and pushed it to vendors. It provided one extra layer of cover, making everything look like a legitimate home services contractor billing for work performed at this address. Vance Crowley had sat at my Thanksgiving table. He had eaten Gloria's green bean casserole, the one Audrey made from her mother's recipe, the one with the crispy onion topping, and he had told me he admired how I was holding up through everything with Gloria. I had thanked him and meant every word. Now my stomach turned over slowly like an engine trying to catch and failing. "What do we do?" I asked. "Tonight, nothing," Audrey said. She began returning the papers to the folder with the same careful precision she'd used laying them out. "Tomorrow I'm calling Simone Forsyth. She's an elder law attorney, downtown practice. I've dealt with her office before through the hospital. She'll know exactly how to handle this." She looked at me across the walnut table. "Dad, I need you to promise me something. Don't contact Grant. Don't move any money. Don't change any passwords. If he senses that we know, he'll start erasing tracks. He'll find out eventually." "Yes," Audrey said, "but we get to decide when." Gloria's hand moved on the table. Her finger tapped twice her shorthand for "yes" for agreement, for "I am with you on this." I reached over and covered her hand with mine. The folder went into Audrey's bag. The Thai food containers went into the trash. Audrey hugged me at the door and held on a moment longer than she usually did, the way she used to when she was small and something had scared her. And then she was gone and the house settled back into quiet. I sat in the kitchen a long while after she left. The yellow legal pad was still on the table. I picked up the pen and wrote $134,000 at the top of a clean page. I looked at it until the number stopped being a number and became something else. It became every therapy session Gloria would not be able to afford, every piece of adaptive equipment, every month of the specialized care she was going to need for the rest of her life. I put the pen down and went to check on my wife. Simone Forsythe's office was on the third floor of a brick building on LaSalle Street, 12 blocks north of Grant Park, in the kind of neighborhood where the parking meters charge $4 an hour, and the coffee shops had names lettered in lowercase on reclaimed wood signs. Audrey had made the appointment for Tuesday morning. I wore my good coat. The waiting area carried the scent of leather and fresh coffee, and the particular hush of a place where people arrive to resolve serious matters. A young receptionist with reading glasses pushed up onto her forehead led us to a conference room with a long walnut table and tall windows facing the street. Between two buildings in the distance, the lake was visible gray and flat and wide under an October sky. Simone Forsythe came in 3 minutes later. She was somewhere in her mid-40s, wearing a tailored charcoal blazer with reading glasses hanging from a thin chain at her neck, and she crossed the room with the unhurried efficiency of a person who had heard a great many difficult things and had not yet met one she couldn't organize into a workable path forward. She shook my hand, shook Audrey's set a legal pad on the table, and sat down. "Walk me through what you've brought," Simone said. Audrey laid the folder open on the table. Simone worked through it without a word, moving at a measured pace, occasionally setting a page aside to write on her legal pad. Paper and the muted murmur of LaSalle Street below were the only sounds in the room. At the 20-minute mark, she closed the folder and rested both hands across it. "The LLC is where everything runs through," she said. "Crowley Home Solutions operates as a conduit. Money comes out of your accounts and gets pushed to vendors through a layer that hides where it originated. This wasn't sloppiness. Somebody built it this way on purpose." Her eyes came to me. "Mr. Sheridan, I have a specific question for you. Sometime in the last 12 months, did someone ask you to read a verification code from a text message out loud?" Something tightened across my chest. "Grant," I said. "Around 3 months back. He told me it was an activation code, said he was configuring a new blood pressure monitor for Gloria." Simone's face gave nothing away, but her pen moved. "That wasn't a device code," she said. "What you read aloud was a bank-issued one-time authorization code. By reciting it to Grant, you effectively added him as an approved external payee on your primary checking account. It went around every standard safeguard the bank has built in for large outgoing transfers." The conference room felt sealed off from everything. He was looking right at me when he asked. I said the words scraping out rough. Sitting at my kitchen counter, Gloria was 20 feet away in the other room. "I understand," Simone said. "I handed him the key to everything. Mr. Sheridan." She brought her weight forward in the chair. "You placed your trust in a man who had positioned himself as a helper, and he weaponized that position. What Grant did carries a specific legal name: undue influence. Under financial law, it's called elder fraud. I need you to hear this clearly. What happened here is not evidence of a lapse in your judgment. It is evidence of a deliberate campaign that targeted your circumstances when you were most stretched." She pulled up 2 documents at her computer and sent them to the printer. The first was a preservation notice, a formal demand to the bank, requiring all transaction records connected to the relevant accounts to be locked in place, making it legally impossible for anyone to erase or alter the payment history. The second was an Adult Protective Services report, which she described as a filing required by Illinois law any time financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is suspected. "Both go out today," she said. "From the moment the bank receives that notice, those records are untouchable. Grant can't get to them. Neither can Vance Crowley." She set her pen down and kept her gaze level on mine. "What comes next is your decision, Mr. Sheridan. Some people in your position want their accounts secured and nothing more. Others want full restitution. Some want to see criminal charges filed." A beat of quiet. "What matters most to you?" I thought of Gloria at the kitchen table the night before, moving her finger across the communication board one letter at a time. T-R-I-E-D. My wife's care, I said. That's the whole answer. Whatever route guarantees that money is recoverable and available for her treatment, that's the one I want. Simone gave a single nod, the kind that means the conversation has just shifted into a different gear. Then we begin, she said. She walked us to the elevator at 11. Riding down, Audrey stood next to me with her arms folded tight and her gaze tracking the floor numbers as they dropped. The tension lived in her shoulders, that specific locked-up posture she got from her mother, the one that announced she was running on willpower alone and had no interest in discussing it before she was ready. You holding up her, I said. I'm fine. A breath out through her nose. Fine and furious are two different things. I know that, I said. I'm the one who raised you. She cut her eyes at me, and something in her expression gave just a fraction, stopped well short of a smile, but not nothing. The lobby doors opened. We stepped out onto LaSalle Street into an October wind that had come off the lake with an edge to it, and Audrey put her arm up for a cab heading north. I found my car and drove home alone. The whole ride back to Riverside, it wasn't Grant my mind kept returning to. It was Vance Crowley. Grant, I could make sense of in the grim particular way you make sense of something you'd rather not understand at all. From the start, Grant had been the kind of man who quietly cataloged everything. What car sat in your driveway, what neighborhood you lived in, how you spent your money, where you went on vacation, filing it all behind an easy grin and a well-placed word of flattery. I'd picked up on it years ago and told myself it was drive, ambition, that men like that built things. Vance was a different animal. Vance was someone you looked straight at and then couldn't quite describe an hour later. Average in every visible way, height build the unremarkable face that doesn't lodge anywhere in your memory once he's left the room. He kept the conversation moving. At holiday gatherings had a talent for names, knew when to laugh. 3 years of Sunday dinners and 4th of July cookouts and one extended Thanksgiving that stretched on past midnight after the power failed, and we dealt cards in the dark by candlelight for 4 hours, and I had never felt so much as a prickle of suspicion. He had scraped the last of Gloria's green bean casserole off the dish and asked if there was a recipe written down somewhere. I pulled into the driveway and left the engine running a few minutes before going inside. That evening, after Gloria's aide finished her nighttime routine and the house quieted down around us, I went and sat on the edge of the bed beside her and laid out everything Simone had told me. I kept it measured and low, the way you talk when the information is frightening enough on its own and you don't want your voice adding to it. Gloria took it in without moving. When I'd said everything there was to say, her hand reached for the communication board on the nightstand. Her finger found a single word. How much? $134,000. I said. Her jaw went tight. Her left hand came up slowly and pressed flat to her sternum. I had never seen her do that before, and something about it went straight through me, because I knew without being told exactly what it meant. She had been waiting for a number. She'd known it would be bad. She hadn't known the shape of it. You knew something was out there, I said. You just didn't know how much. She gave one small shake of her head. Then her finger moved back to the board. Fiona. My chest seized. She doesn't know, I said. Audrey doesn't believe she does. Everything points to Grant keeping her completely in the dark. Gloria's eyes filled. She didn't release it. In 41 years, she had let me see her cry exactly twice, and both times our daughters had been at the center of it. Now, her eyes went glassy and her lips pressed together, and she lifted her chin toward the ceiling for a long moment. I reached across and held her hand. We are going to be okay. Simone knows her way through this. Audrey knows her way through this. My fingers tightened around hers. And I am not going anywhere. She looked back at me. Her thumb crossed my knuckles once, then again. I switched off the lamp and stayed sitting there in the dark listening until her breathing opened up and slowed all the way down, and I knew she was under. Then I went to the kitchen, reached above the refrigerator and poured 2 fingers of the scotch I kept up there for the occasions that earned it. I stood at the counter, thinking about a man who had sat 3 feet from me in my own kitchen and asked me to read him a code off my phone while my wife was in the next room. The bourbon did not help as much as I had hoped. 2 days on, Simone called with news I hadn't seen coming. The wedding planner replied to the preservation notice this morning, she said. She submitted her full correspondence log. Inside it, there's an email from Grant's personal account, sent directly to her, telling her to reclassify all future venue payments as general event consulting fees. He specified that the billing description had to read professional services and not reference the event itself. I lowered myself into the kitchen chair. He put it in writing, Simone said. From a personal address on a server that date stamps every transmission. She let that sit. Mr. Sheridan, your son-in-law, isn't someone who got careless with paperwork. He has been deliberately constructing documentation designed to resemble something legitimate. That distinction matters for what this becomes. What does it become? I asked. I already knew. It moves, Simone said, from a civil dispute over money to a matter of criminal intent. After the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table without getting up, both palms flat on the surface, eyes on the window. The backyard had gone gray and contracted looking in the October light. The oak tree Gloria had put in the ground the year Fiona was born was shedding, releasing leaves one at a time down onto the grass. Criminal. I turned the word over. I thought about my daughter 6 weeks from now, standing somewhere in a white dress. Then, I picked up the phone and called Audrey. Lakeview Rehabilitation Center on Erie Street had a smell I knew well, floor wax and stale recycled air. An institutional odor I'd learned to connect with something like hope, because Gloria was always a little bit further along when she walked back out than when she'd gone in. Dr. Vera Novak had been running Gloria's speech and communication therapy for 7 months by then. Late 30s, hair drawn back neatly with a calm and deliberate way about her that said she'd made peace with how slowly this kind of work moved. The call came Wednesday morning. Could I come in Thursday afternoon? There was something underneath the question in her voice, a weight I'd learned to pick out after 41 years of paying close attention to people I cared about. She wasn't calling to give me a standard update. I got there 10 minutes early. Dr. Novak came out to the therapy room door and took my hand in both of hers. That right there told me this visit was different. Gloria was already positioned near the window in her wheelchair. Morning light fell across her, the silver threaded through her hair, the steadiness that lived in her eyes. The way she looked at me when I stepped into the room was something I hadn't seen since before the stroke took so much from her. Purposeful, composed in the way of someone who has been rehearsing something, waiting for the moment to finally say it. Mr. Sheridan, Dr. Novak said, I'm glad you came. Please sit down. I drew a chair up beside Gloria's wheelchair and settled in so I was facing them both. There's something I want you to see, Dr. Novak said, and she rotated her laptop so the screen faced me. A communication log filled it. Timestamps, attempted symbol selections, frequency patterns laid out in columns. For the past 4 weeks, she said, your wife has been trying to deliver the same piece of information at every single session. The old device had only a basic symbol library. It lacked the range for what Gloria was working to say. 10 days ago, we'd switched her to an upgraded one. Dr. Novak glanced at Gloria and then back to me. With the expanded phrase bank at her disposal, she'd finally been able to get it out. My pulse was doing something I couldn't ignore. What was it? I said. What was she trying to say? Dr. Novak turned to Gloria. Gloria reached for the new device, a flat tablet fixed to an adjustable arm on her wheelchair tray. Her left index finger moved across it with a sureness that stopped me cold. She was navigating a grid of words and phrases I couldn't make out from my angle. Then the tablet speaker produced a synthesized voice, on Grant taking money from our account for a long time. The silence that followed was absolute. I could make out the ventilation system ticking somewhere above us. She's been trying to get this to you for 4 weeks, Dr. Novak said quietly. Possibly even longer with the previous device. We don't know exactly when she first understood what was happening. What we do know is that she has been aware, and she's been reaching out to you this whole time. Something stung hard behind my eyes. I pressed my hand against my mouth and pulled air in through my nose and looked at my wife, those steady brown eyes holding mine. The look on her face that I'd been reading as calm as patience, I finally understood what it actually was. Relief. She'd been holding all of this by herself, locked inside a body that refused to do what she needed it to, for God only knew how long. She'd sat at the same dinner table as Grant and watched him grin and call me Pop, while she was sealed off behind a wall of broken connections with no way to push the words through fast enough for anyone to catch them. Gloria. Her name came out of me in pieces. I didn't try to pull it back together. I am so sorry. I should have found a way to reach you sooner. I should have... Her finger was already moving on the device. The synthesized voice came through before I could finish the thought. Not your fault. We fix it now. Together. I reached across and wrapped both hands around her left one and didn't let go. We stayed like that for a stretch, no words necessary. After a few minutes, Dr. Novak spoke again, gently, deliberately. "There's one more thing," she said. "Your wife has asked me to help set up a private meeting. She wants to sit down with an attorney not through any family member acting on her behalf, but in her own right." I looked at Gloria. She was already nodding before I turned back. "She wants her own voice in this," I said. "She's always had her own voice." "She just needed the right instrument to carry it," Dr. Novak said. "Grant made his move first. I learned about it on a Monday morning, 3 days after the meeting with Dr. Novak. I was at the stove putting together Gloria's breakfast when my phone pulled up a notification from the joint email account Gloria and I kept for family messages, an account Grant apparently still had his hands in because an email he'd fired off at 6:47 that morning had been auto-forwarded straight to it. The subject line, "Concerned about Dad's finances, please read." He'd addressed it to Gloria's 2 sisters in Louisville, to my brother Lyle in Columbus, to 3 cousins I hadn't spoken to since the Christmas before, and to Fiona. 4 paragraphs of meticulously assembled worry, Grant positioning himself as a dutiful son-in-law who'd stumbled onto troubling signs in Arthur's financial picture and felt he owed it to everyone to speak up. Attached was a screenshot of a bank transfer, a large withdrawal from the joint account, and the memo field, the one that would have shown clearly it was a medical equipment payment I had signed off on myself, had been trimmed from the image with such clean precision that you could trace the exact digital line where it had been cut away. 11 minutes later, my phone rang. "Arthur." Lyle's voice came through tight, that particular strain he gets when something has frightened him, and he's doing his best not to let it show. "I just got this email from Grant. There's a transfer here. It looks like Audrey pulled a significant amount out of your account. Is everything all right?" I put the spatula down and killed the burner. "I need you to hear every word I'm about to say, and I need you to trust me the way you've trusted me for 68 years. Audrey didn't take a thing. The image Grant sent you was cropped. The memo field, the part that would have explained the whole payment, he cut it out before he pressed send." A pause on the line. "Why would he do something like that? Because he wants the story in everyone's head before the real one has a chance to surface." "Don't respond to that email," I said. "Don't pick up the phone and call Grant. And if anyone else in the family reaches out to you about any of this, I need to know." Another pause longer. "Arthur, what exactly is happening out there?" "Something I'm dealing with," I said, "through attorneys. I'll walk you through everything when I'm able to, but right now I'm asking you to hold on and trust me." Lyle went quiet. Then, "Okay," he said, "just that. No follow-up questions, no conditions attached, just 60 years of being brothers pressed into a single syllable, and it closed my throat in a way I hadn't seen coming. "Okay, when you can talk, call me." I ended the call and dialed Audrey right away. First ring, which meant she'd already pulled up the email. "I know," she said the moment the line connected. "I've got it open right now. Dad, don't reply to a single person on that thread. Send me every response you get, and let me take care of Simone." "He cut out the memo line," I said. The words came out stripped and hard. "He sat there this morning and figured out exactly where to make that cut so the one thing that explains everything would simply be gone. And then he sent it to every person in our family." "I know." Audrey's voice had gone tight and clipped the register she lands on when she's genuinely furious and disciplined enough not to let it make her reckless. "Dad, listen to me carefully. This is actually good news for us." "Good. He's frightened," she said. "He got wind of the preservation notices. Simone saw this coming. When someone starts working this hard to get out in front of the story, it means they can feel the floor going out from under them. He isn't doing this because he feels secure. He's doing it because he's panicking." A brief silence. "I'm forwarding Simone the email right now. She'll need the original message headers." When the call ended, I stood at the kitchen counter and let myself breathe for a long moment, just in through the nose and out again. Then I forwarded the email to Audrey, walked back to the stove, lit the burner, and finished Gloria's eggs. I brought the tablet to the breakfast table so Gloria could read it herself. I watched her go through it, the fine tightening at the corners of her eyes, her nostrils pulling slightly wider, her jaw going rigid as poured concrete. "He put Fiona on it too," I said. "Before I take you into what happened next a moment that changed everything I thought I knew about who was really on my side, let me ask you something. If you discovered that someone close to you had been working against you in secret, Would you confront them the moment you found out? Or would you wait and build your case in silence? Her finger shot to the board without hesitation. One word knows. I shook my head. That's not something we can be certain of yet. Audrey believes Grant gave Fiona his own account of things. She may have taken it as gospel. Gloria's left hand came down on the table with a flat crack, not a blow, more like a punctuation mark. Then her finger moved at me at herself at the tablet. You're asking whether we should contact Fiona. She shook her head no. Then she gestured at the tablet, then at her own chest. Hold our ground, I said. Let her be the one to come to us. One nod, deliberate and firm. I sat looking at Gloria, across what remained of breakfast, the eggs long since gone cold. Autumn light pouring through the window at that low October slant that drains color from everything and makes the world look like something remembered rather than seen. After 41 years together, I thought she was still the one teaching me. That same afternoon, Audrey rang with something I hadn't prepared myself to hear. It was the app, she said, the care management platform we relied on for tracking Mom's prescriptions and scheduling her appointments. She'd gone to check Thursday's therapy slot that morning and found herself locked out entirely. Fiona held the administrator credentials. Grant had apparently arranged for her to revise the access permissions. Audrey couldn't reach Mom's care records at all. What moved through me wasn't anger, not precisely. It was something that ran older and deeper, the recognition that a threshold had been violated that should never have been anywhere within reach. He went through Fiona to do it, I said. She probably wasn't told what she was really enabling, Audrey replied, and I could hear her straining toward fairness, even as her voice went tight around the edges. He might have framed it as a security measure, a routine tweak to account privacy. She trusted him. Past tense, I said. She trusted him. And he used that to get her to tamper with her own mother's medical account. A silent stretch between us. Then Audrey said softly and evenly, I know, Dad. I phoned Fiona that evening. She picked up after the fourth ring, and what I heard in her voice was a studied evenness, the flatness of someone who'd been guided towards certain silences. Hey, Dad. Hi, sweetheart. Same easy warmth I'd always used with her. Just checking in. How are things coming along with the wedding? Good, she said, half a beat too quick. Really good. It's just busy. Fiona? I let a breath go. Your mom's care app. Audrey's been shut out of it. The pause that followed ran a full second longer than it had any reason to. Grant thought it would be cleaner to reduce the number of people with login access. Fewer accounts means less risk of things getting double booked. My jaw ached with the restraint it took not to say what I was thinking. Your sister has had that system memorized for 8 months, I told her. Every medication, every dosage interval, every appointment, every allergy flag in there. That access needs to be restored. I'll bring it up with Grant. Fiona? I'll talk to him, Dad. On that last word, her voice gave just slightly a hairline fault line in the composed exterior that Grant had so carefully built up around her. I really have to go. I love you. The line went quiet before I could answer. The text landed at 11:17 on a Thursday night. I was in bed but nowhere near sleep, fixed on the ceiling in the dark, the way I'd been nearly every night for the past 3 weeks, cycling through the same arithmetic, what was left in the accounts after Simone's freeze, whether it could sustain Gloria's next intensive therapy, round what the specialist at Rush Medical Center had said about the 18-month recovery window, and how much of that window Grant had quietly consumed before we ever caught on. The phone screen blazed to life on the nightstand. I reached for it, expecting something routine, a headline, a prescription alert. It was from Audrey, time-stamped 11:16:60 seconds before. Dad, call me now. Don't wake Mom. Before I'd read it twice, I was already moving out of bed into the kitchen, the door drawn most of the way closed at my back. I dialed her immediately. She picked up before the first ring finished. Fiona messaged me about 40 minutes ago, Audrey said, and there was something threaded through her voice I hadn't encountered since her divorce 7 years back. Now a leashed urgency controlled on the outside, with something immense bearing down against it. She has no idea I've been assembling evidence. As far as she's concerned, she's just unloading on her sister. What did she say? I heard the rustle of paper. Audrey had written it out or printed it. She'd already recognized what it was. I'm giving you this verbatim, Grant says. Your dad is being difficult about the wedding finances, but honestly it's fine because your parents already agreed to help us out. He says they told him they wanted to contribute and that it would basically come back to us from the estate eventually anyway. So, It's not really borrowing, it's more like an advance. The kitchen held its breath. The refrigerator droned beneath the quiet. Through the window above the sink, a car drifted past its headlights, raking the glass and moving on. She has no idea, I said. None whatsoever, Audrey said. Grant convinced her you and Mom signed off on this willingly. He called it a contribution. He told her the estate would return it eventually, which meant it barely qualified as borrowing. Her voice drew tighter. Dad. After that, she sent 3 more messages. She's fretting over the seating chart. She's going back and forth on the rehearsal dinner. She wanted my opinion on whether the centerpieces were too tall. She is walking into her own wedding, genuinely believing everything is fine, spending money she has no idea anyone took. My palm went flat on the counter. I could feel the cold of the tile right through my hand. Audrey, I said, what do we do with this? I've already sent it to Simone, she said. What Fiona handed us tonight is the cornerstone of this entire case. Grant, in his own words, in writing, with a timestamp, telling a family member that he characterized the theft as an estate advance. Dad. This is what we were missing. We can establish that he knew what he was doing because he had to fabricate a plausible version of events to keep Fiona from asking questions. I shifted back against the counter and pressed my wrist to my forehead. The bone-deep fatigue that had taken up residence behind my eyes over the past 3 weeks pushed in further still. She's going to be shattered, I said, when the truth reaches her. I know. Audrey's voice fell. I know she is. She loves him, Dad. I know. Neither of us spoke for a stretch. I could hear Audrey on the other end measured deliberate breathing, the rhythm she falls into when she's working something out and can't afford to be sloppy. She's my daughter, I said. Whatever part she played or didn't play in any of this, she's still my daughter. She's mine too, Audrey said, and her voice had gone quiet and gentle. We'll work out how to reach Fiona when the time comes. But what I need from you right now is to let me and Simone handle this message the way it needs to be handled. Can you give me that? Yes, I said. Simone also wants to set up Gloria's cognitive evaluation for next week, Audrey went on. An independent geriatric psychiatrist, no ties to the family, no connection to Grant. Once that assessment is in the record, we can proceed to formally cancel Grant's authorization on the accounts. He'll be served with official notice. He'll know what's happening. We know, I said. Yes, Audrey said. He will. And we have to be fully prepared before that moment arrives. A quiet beat. How is Mom tonight? I looked down the hallway toward the closed bedroom door. She's asleep, I said. She's tougher than either of us, you know that. I do know that, Audrey said, and something in how she said it settled warmly in my chest. She always has been. Try to get some rest, Dad. It's going to be a full day tomorrow. I remained at the counter after we said goodbye, one hand still pressed against the cold tile eyes on the dark glass of the window, where the night sat heavy on the other side. From somewhere deeper in the house came the sound of Gloria's oxygen monitor, its slow and steady pulse marking the time. The following Tuesday, inside a neutral conference room at the Rehabilitation Center, an independent geriatric psychiatrist worked with Gloria and her communication device and Dr. Vera Novak for 90 minutes. When it was done, he put his signature to a document establishing that Gloria Louise Sheridan held full cognitive capacity and was legally entitled to direct her own financial and medical decisions. 3 days after that, Gloria signed the revocation. Her right hand trembled against the pen. Her left, the stronger one, lay pressed flat on the tabletop alongside the document. Her jaw was firm. Her gaze was steady and clear. Every stroke of that signature was measured and unhurried and left no room for interpretation. Grant Riordan's authorization on our accounts was terminated at 3:42 on a Tuesday afternoon in early November. He hadn't been told yet. The call from the bank arrived on a Tuesday morning, 4 days before the wedding. Gloria and I were in the living room, working through her morning exercises. The left arm rotations Dr. Novak had folded into the routine a couple of weeks back, the ones that brought a hard clench to Gloria's jaw every single time, though she never breathed a word about stopping. My phone went off on the side table. I looked at the screen, an unfamiliar 312 number labeled bank, the contact I'd saved on Simone's instructions. I'll be back in a minute, I told her. Keep at it. The look she gave me said that a 65-year-old woman had been managing her own arm rotations for the better part of 6 decades and did not particularly need me hovering. I walked through to the kitchen and picked up. The fraud specialist on the other end had the measured, no-nonsense cadence of someone whose entire workday consisted of delivering devastating information and who had made her peace with delivering it plainly. She ran through the confirmation's legal revocation, received Simone's preservation notices on file, primary accounts locked down and referred for forensic review. Then she said something that sent my hand groping for the nearest chair back. "Mr. Sheridan, there's a timeline matter I need to bring to your attention," she said. "3 weeks ago, an automated clearinghouse transfer was initiated out of your joint account. The amount was $31,000, flagged to process to the Harborview Pavilion event account as the remaining venue balance. In the system, it registered as pending, which would have shown the wedding portal as paid in full." Pending, I repeated, choosing the word deliberately. "But the legal freeze stopped the actual transfer." "That's correct," she said. Nothing moved. "The venue's records showed the transaction as processing for close to 3 weeks, but it was officially reversed this morning, and the full balance returned to your account." I pulled out the chair and sat. "So the venue never actually received that payment," I said. "Correct. The earlier deposits went through before the freeze was in place, but the $31,000 final balance never landed. Their bank will be reaching out to them this morning." I thanked her, ended the call, and sat there at the kitchen table with my hands clasped in front of me, not moving. $31,000, 4 days before the wedding, flowers ordered, catering locked in, 200 guests who had confirmed secured hotel rooms, wrapped presents sitting in spare bedrooms all over the Chicago area. Before I'd even had time to turn that over in my mind, the phone rang again. Grant. I picked up on the third ring. "What did you do?" Not a question. A statement aimed at me like something thrown. Every bit of the relaxed charm he brought out at family gatherings was gone, stripped away, and what showed through underneath was meaner and harder, like a board with the finish sanded off. The venue just called Fiona. They told her the final payment was reversed. They said the account has a legal hold. "What did you do?" "I safeguarded my accounts," I said. "The same accounts you have been drawing from for 16 months, without my knowledge or consent." A sharp breath. "Then that was a gift. You and Gloria signed off on it." "I did not sign off on anything," I said, steadier than I had any right to sound. "And Gloria did not sign off on anything either, and I suspect you are aware of that. You are going to wreck Fiona's wedding over something that could have been cleared up with a conversation." "Grant." I used his name the way you use a name when the argument is over, whether the other person knows it or not. "You have no legal authority over our accounts that was rescinded on Tuesday. If you have questions about where things stand financially, they go to our attorney. Her name is Simone Forsythe. Audrey will get you the contact information." 4 full seconds of quiet on his end. "You're making a mistake," Grant said, his voice sliding down into something low and deliberate, the tone of a man working through a new set of calculations. "You will regret this." "Maybe so," I said. "But I'll regret it with my wife's care fund still in one piece." I put the phone down face first on the table and kept both palms pressed flat to the wood until the trembling in my hands faded. Fiona called that evening. She was already in tears when I answered, not the composed, buttoned-up version of herself I'd spoken with last time, but something far more exposed. This was the sound of a 33-year-old who had spent an entire day trying to hold a crumbling situation together by sheer force of will. "Dad." The word cracked as she said it. "Can you tell me what's happening?" The venue got in touch. They said the payment didn't go through. "Is Grant right? Did you do this deliberately? Are you actually trying to destroy this for us?" "I don't know who to believe right now, Dad. I'm 4 days away from my wedding, Fiona." I kept my voice level and quiet, the way I had learned to, through every difficult moment of her life, scraped knees, her first bad heartbreak, the long night we spent in a waiting room together while her mother came out of surgery. "Slow down. Listen to me." A shaky exhale through the line. "What I did was not meant to hurt you," I said. "It was not meant to touch your wedding. It was meant to protect the money your mother depends on to get through every single month. The therapy, the equipment, the appointments with her specialists. That is what those funds exist for. That's all they have ever existed for. Grant told me you both agreed to it. I never agreed to anything." My voice nearly gave out on that sentence. "Fiona, what you need to do is go talk to your mother. Not Grant, not me, her. Ask her yourself whether she consented to redirect her care money toward a venue." A stretch of silence. When she spoke again, it came out barely above a whisper. But she can't really answer Dad. You know that. She can answer more than people give her credit for, I said. Go ask her, then call me. She didn't call that night. I sat alone in the dark kitchen until midnight, the house making its familiar sounds around me, and I let my mind go to the little girl who used to doze off in the back seat after soccer, head tilted against the window. I thought about how completely I loved her, and I thought about how love and truth were 4 days from slamming into each other in front of everyone we cared about, and that there was no way to cushion the blow, only to make sure the truth was solid and present when the moment came. On the morning of the wedding, I stood at the bathroom mirror for a while. The charcoal suit, the one Gloria had steered me toward 3 years ago at the Nordstrom on LaSalle Street, during a time when she could still walk the floor of a store, pull jackets off the rack, and hold them flat against my chest to judge the fit. Too dark, she'd say, or that one, try that. She'd landed on this particular color because it made my eyes look less worn, she said. I'd teased her about it. She'd teased back. We'd bickered about it good-naturedly through the whole alterations visit. I stood in front of the mirror now and held that afternoon in my mind for a moment. Then I went to get Gloria ready. She had asked Dr. Novak's aide to arrive at 8:00 in the morning, earlier than usual, because Gloria wanted her hair done the right way. None of the weekday practicality. The pearl earrings we'd bought to mark our 25th anniversary, the charcoal cardigan that paired with my suit, which she had set out on the bedside chair herself the night before, guiding the aide through it with her communication device with the unhurried authority of a woman who had been dressing for occasions that mattered for 65 years and had no need of anyone else deciding what she would wear. Only the doing required assistance, not the choosing. When she was ready and sitting in the wheelchair, we looked at each other for a beat without speaking because there was nothing to say that the moment didn't already hold. You look beautiful, I told her. She pointed at me, put up a thumbs up, then made the small, slightly impatient gesture she used when she felt I was selling something short. Aunt Loretta was already in the lobby of the Harbor View Pavilion when we got there. My sister-in-law, 62 years old, 5'3", the kind of woman who had spent 4 decades making it clear that nonsense was not something she had time for. She'd made the drive up from Louisville the night before and was posted near the entrance in a plum-colored dress and low heels. And the second she caught sight of us coming through the doors, she was already moving with the brisk certainty of someone who had been standing by and was through standing by. She bent down and kissed Gloria on the cheek, took her hand, and held it. Then she rose and looked at me with an expression that told me she understood exactly what this day was going to ask of us and that she'd already made up her mind about where she stood. How are you holding up? She said. Ask me in 4 hours, I said. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Fair enough. She fell into step alongside the wheelchair as we moved into the main hall. I got here early enough to check the seating chart. Arthur, they've put you and Gloria at table 11. Where's table 11? Right next to the kitchen doors. Her voice didn't waver. I counted. 10 tables separate you from the head table. I stopped mid-step. The ballroom was already dressed round tables under white linen tall centerpieces of ivory orchids and trailing ivy that must have run more per arrangement than a month of my grocery bills. Crystal glassware picked up the late afternoon sun, angling through the tall windows. Beyond the glass, the lake stretched out gray and blue and vast, and for a moment, the view was genuinely stunning in a way that only made everything worse. And Audrey, I said. Table 14, Aunt Loretta said. The one that's essentially inside the kitchen corridor. Something moved through me that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. The particular feeling of a man who has held his patience for a long time and has just hit the hard edge of it. I located the venue coordinator near the bar, a young woman with a headset clipped to her ear, a tablet in both hands, and the strained look of someone managing 17 things at once. Excuse me, I said. I'm Arthur Sheridan, Gloria Sheridan's husband, the father-in-law of the groom. She looked up. Mr. Sheridan, of course. Is everything all right? My daughter Audrey needs to be moved to the family table, I said. She is her mother's primary caregiver, and Gloria needs her within reach throughout the evening. The coordinator's expression cycled through several quick calculations. Sir, the seating was finalized by the... I understand who finalized it, I said. I'm asking you to bring 1 extra chair to the family table. That's the whole request. 1 chair. She held my gaze for a moment. Then she looked at Gloria, who was watching the exchange from her wheelchair, chin-level pearl earrings catching the light. Of course, Mr. Sheridan, she said. I'll see to it right now. I watched her cross the ballroom with a folding chair in hand. From the other side of the room, I saw Grant clock it. He was at the bar glass in hand, his second or third of the evening, judging by the slack quality around his jaw. And he tracked the coordinator, setting up that extra chair with an expression that moved from confusion through calculation and settled somewhere colder. He found my eyes across the room. I held his look for 3 full seconds. Then I turned back to Gloria. "Ready?" I asked her. She reached up and straightened my tie. Audrey arrived at the ballroom at 6:45. I watched her come through the main entrance from across the room. She had on the midnight blue dress she always wore to formal occasions, the one Gloria had helped her choose 2 Christmases ago, and she moved through the crowd with the measured, purposeful calm of a woman who had already decided what she was here to do and was not going to be turned around. She caught my eye and gave a small nod. I nodded back. Then Grant stepped away from the bar. He cut her off 12 feet from the family table, planting himself between Audrey and the chair the coordinator had placed beside Gloria's wheelchair. He'd changed into his tuxedo since I last spotted him near the bar, but the looseness around his eyes and jaw hadn't changed. If anything, it had sharpened into something unpleasant. He leaned close and said something I couldn't make out from where I sat. Audrey didn't step back. She held her ground exactly where she was, hands at her sides, and looked at him the way she looked at hospital administrators who tried to tell her the paperwork could wait. "Go back to your seat," Grant said louder now. The couple at the nearest table glanced over. "You were assigned a place. Use it." "My father asked me to sit here," Audrey said, her voice carrying cleanly without being raised. "That's what I'm going to do." Grant's neck went red above his tuxedo collar. "This is my wedding, my reception. You don't get to grant." Aunt Loretta rose from her chair beside Gloria, 5'3" in her heels, and she leveled a finger at him that could have stopped traffic on Lake Shore Drive. "You sit yourself down right now before you do something you can't undo." "Nobody asked you, Loretta." "I'm asking myself," Aunt Loretta said, her voice climbing. "And what I'm asking is why you're standing between a woman and her mother at a family dinner. You want to answer that in front of all these people, because I have got all night." Several guests at the surrounding tables had turned fully around in their seats. I noticed phones beginning to come up, not the casual lifting of people capturing a wedding memory, but the deliberate, careful filming of people who understood that what they were watching might matter later. Gloria's left hand came down on the arm of her wheelchair. 3 sharp knocks, hard and deliberate. Grant turned toward the sound. His gaze moved from Gloria to the extra chair to Audrey, and I watched his expression recalibrate even from across the table. I recognized that specific look, the look of a man weighing whether the thing he was about to do would cost him more than holding back. He read it wrong. What happened next was over in under 4 seconds. Audrey reached to pull the extra chair out from the table. Grant's hand shot out and grabbed the back of a wheelchair. Not Audrey's chair, Gloria's. My wife's wheelchair, the one she had been sitting in all evening. He yanked it backward with both hands and everything he had behind it. The screech of the wheels dragging across marble cut through every conversation in the room. Gloria's shoulder found the floor before I had fully understood what was happening. The sound of the impact is one I will carry the rest of my life. Not the cinematic crash of a fall in a film, something quieter and far worse. The particular sound of a person who has no way to catch themselves meeting a surface that gives nothing back. Her left arm came up by instinct and took some of it, but her shoulder and hip absorbed the rest, and she lay on the cold marble floor of the Harbor View Pavilion ballroom, 200 people watching her pearl earrings skidding free and coming to rest 6 feet away. The jazz trio stopped mid-measure. Every conversation in the room went silent at the same instant. Gloria. I was on my feet before I finished saying her name. My right knee buckled when I tried to get down beside her. 68 years old, and arthritis does not make allowances for the urgency of a moment. I went down on one knee and one palm, the cold marble pressing hard through my dress trousers, and I got my hand to her face before anything else. Her eyes were open, focused, and burning with a fury I had not seen in 41 years. Cold and absolute, aimed at something above and behind me that I knew without looking was Grant Reardon. "I'm here," I told her. My voice came out stripped bare. "Don't move. I'm right here." Her left hand found my wrist and closed around it. Behind me, Aunt Loretta's voice had reached a pitch I hadn't heard from her since she caught one of my nephews shoplifting at 17. "What is wrong with you?" she screamed at Grant. "What is wrong with you? She is in a wheelchair. She cannot walk. You just pulled..." She shifted toward it, Grant said. His voice had gone tight and careful, the specific tone of a man building his version of events on the fly. The chair moved. I was trying to steady it. You had both hands on the back of it and you pulled. Aunt Loretta's voice cracked with fury. I watched you do it. Half this room watched you. There are 20 phones recording your face right now, Grant. So, you think very carefully before you say one more word about what you were trying to do. A waiter appeared beside me on the floor. Young professional already pressing a thick linen napkin to a cut on Gloria's palm, from a glass that had shattered when she went down. I hadn't even registered the broken glass until that moment. My eyes hadn't left the 6 feet of marble separating my wife's ear from her pearl earring. Audrey was the one who moved first. She placed herself between Grant and Gloria, not quickly, but with the kind of deliberate calm that is somehow worse than urgency, the unhurried pace of a person who settled on a course of action long ago and carries no doubt about it. She held Grant's gaze. Every person in that ballroom went still. Grant. Her voice barely registered above a murmur. Would you like everyone in this room to hear the truth? Grant laughed. It was an awful sound, hollow. No ease in it, no trace of the warm fluid charm he'd been running on for 4 years, at every dinner table that would have him. What came out instead was the sound fear makes when it tries to pass itself off as scorn, and it died in the air, absorbed by the silence of that enormous room, the way sound dies against stone. The truth, he echoed, spreading his arms wide in a pantomime of confidence for the 200 witnesses around him. Sure, by all means, Audrey, let's discuss the truth. Let's discuss your months of meddling in finances that were none of your business. Let's discuss how you talked an old man into locking his own accounts 4 days before his daughter's wedding. Audrey's voice stayed level. I have the bank records. I have the vendor portal logs. I have your email to the wedding planner where you asked her to alter how the billing was categorized. I have the LLC paperwork on Crowley Homes Solutions. A beat of silence. And I have a notarized legal revocation my mother signed 11 days ago, which means every transaction touching those accounts across the last 16 months was made without her knowledge and without my father's approval. She let that land. So I'll give you one final chance. Do you want to keep going? Grant's jaw locked. Phones were already out across the room. The pretense of not watching had vanished entirely. The table closest to him, Grant's old college crowd stuffed into rented tuxedos, sat frozen, not one of them moving. Glasses hung suspended mid-air, mid-sip, their owners caught in a scene they'd never imagined being witnesses to. Fiona had risen from her chair. She'd been at the head table in her white dress, and I hadn't registered the moment she stood, but there she was. Upright, her complexion drained to the particular shade that settles on a person when something they've just heard is quietly dismantling the story they believed about their own life. Her eyes weren't on Audrey, they were locked on her husband. Grant! The words came out fragile, trembling at the edges. What billing descriptions? What is she talking about? Fiona, sit down. What does she mean? Grant, her voice pitched higher. What is Crowley Homes Solutions? That's Vance's company. Why does Vance's company appear anywhere in our wedding? Grant swung toward his wife, wearing the look of a cornered man, not a calculated expression, but a raw, reflexive one. I'll walk you through everything later. What matters right now is that your sister has been working to sabotage this family since the moment that final venue payment failed to go through. Fiona's voice splintered. I found out this morning. The coordinator phoned me directly. She told me $31,000 had been reversed. She told me my parents' account was frozen. Tears had begun moving down her face, cutting through the makeup she'd spent the whole morning carefully putting on. You told me they were on board. You said it was their gift to us. You said they wanted this. They did. I need to hear that from them. Fiona pushed back from the head table. Her dress swept through the light thrown by the crystal chandeliers, every candle, every flower, all that meticulous and costly spectacle. And she crossed to the family table and went to her knees on the marble right there beside me, beside her mother. Mom? Her voice gave out entirely. She took Gloria's left hand, the one not clenched around my wrist, and held it tight. Mom, was this your decision? Did you and Dad tell Grant he was allowed to use your money? Gloria's left hand stirred. She'd lost her hold on my wrist somewhere in the chaos. The communication device had been jarred loose from its bracket when the wheelchair tipped, but Aunt Loretta had lifted it off the floor and was extending it toward her now, and Gloria closed her shaking fingers around it, trembling, not because she was weak, but because of everything she'd been holding in, waiting for exactly this. She dragged her finger across the screen. The synthesized voice rang out through the hushed ballroom. No, he asked for a code. I did not know what it was for. He lied to me. Fiona made a sound with no word in it, a ragged, involuntary exhale, as though something solid inside her had just given way. Grant's expression shifted. Every layer of the performance collapsed at once, the whole structure coming apart, the way a stage set does when the supports underneath finally buckle. What surfaced in its place was not guilt, not quite fear either. It was pure arithmetic. A man tallying what remained and arriving at a sum that didn't work in his favor. And then even the arithmetic fell apart. It's fine. His voice cracked open loud, ugly, stripped of any restraint. The voice of a man who's concluded that if the loss is inevitable, he'll take it at maximum volume. Fine. You want the truth? Here's the truth that money was parked in an account collecting dust. She's 68 years old. He thrust a finger toward Gloria on the floor. She is not going to recover. The doctors gave 18 months for meaningful improvement, and that window is nearly closed. That money would have gone on funding a bed for a woman who is never going to walk again. I used it instead to give your daughter a wedding worth remembering. That is the truth. The money was always going to Fiona in the end. I simply adjusted when. The quiet in that room was absolute. I could make out someone weeping 2 tables over. I lifted my eyes from the floor toward the man who'd called me Pop for 4 years. She is right here, I said. The words came out just above a whisper. She is on the floor of this room, and she can hear everything you just said. She is right here. Grant's eyes dropped to Gloria. Gloria held his gaze. She did not flinch. Fiona let go of her mother's hand, got to her feet, and turned to face the man she had married. The tear lines on her cheeks had gone dry, and her jaw had taken on a hardness that bore in that moment a striking resemblance to her mother's. "Get out," Fiona said. Grant stood there. "Get out of this room," she repeated, her voice rising. "Right now." Security reached him before Grant had finished processing what Fiona had just said. 2 men in dark suits appeared from the direction of the coat check, the kind of discreet professional presence that venues of this caliber keep nearby precisely for situations like this one. They took up positions on either side of Grant with the well-practiced even-handedness of people who know how to relocate someone without making physical contact just yet. Grant looked at the 2 men. He looked at Fiona. He took in the 200 people phones, raised mouths parted. He looked down at Gloria, still gripping the communication device, still watching him with that flat, unyielding stare. Then he tugged his tuxedo jacket straight, turned himself around and walked out. The room exhaled a long collective release that had been building for the better part of 10 minutes. Paramedics arrived 4 minutes after that. The venue coordinator had placed the call the instant Gloria went down, and I felt grateful for that in the specific bone-tired way that gratitude arrives when someone else managed to think of the thing your own mind was too rattled to reach. 2 medics in dark uniforms moved alongside Gloria with quiet precision, asking her to follow a light, asking her to apply pressure to their fingers running through to their questions. She typed her answers on the communication device while I stayed crouched beside her, one hand resting on her shoulder, working to hold my breathing together. "Her left side is tracking well," the lead medic said. "Her shoulder absorbed the fall, but nothing feels out of place. Given her existing condition, we'd like to bring her in for imaging, rule out any fractures." "Yes," I told him. "Whatever she needs." Aunt Loretta materialized at my side. At some point, I couldn't have said, when she had retrieved Gloria's pearl earring from the floor, and she laid it in my open palm without speaking. Her eyes carried redness at the rims, but her jaw was firm, her shoulders squared, and the look she gave me was the same one she'd given me decades ago when I'd stumbled into a mess too tangled to get out of by myself. "I'm coming with you," she said. "You don't have to, Arthur." She spoke my name exactly the way Gloria did when a conversation was finished. "I'm coming." Audrey rode in the ambulance beside her mother. Aunt Loretta took her own car and followed. Neither of us spoke for the first several blocks. I was in the passenger seat of Aunt Loretta's rental, a Ford something silver that carried the mingled scent of Pine Air freshener and whatever drive-through she'd hit before picking me up, and Chicago was sliding past the dark windows, and I had nothing to say. "She's going to be okay," Aunt Loretta said. "I know," I said. "Arthur, chum." "I know," I said a second time, and on those 2 words my voice finally gave out, fracturing in a way I'd been holding off for the better part of 40 minutes and couldn't hold off any longer. I brought my fist up against my mouth and turned toward the glass. Out on the street, the glow from an all-night convenience store dragged itself across the window and disappeared. I know she's going to be okay. It's just that sound. When she went down, I can't stop hearing it. Aunt Loretta didn't answer. She reached across and rested her hand on my arm, and she kept it there until we pulled into the hospital. Rush Medical Center's emergency wing at that hour had a smell to it, antiseptic underlaid with the airless stillness that belongs specifically to 2 in the morning. A nurse attended to a shallow cut on Gloria's palm, a piece of broken glass from the venue that I had completely failed to register, hadn't known it was there until the medic flagged it, which told me exactly what condition I'd been in when I went down to that floor with her. The scans came back clean. Her shoulder was bruised, her hip sore to the touch, 2 weeks of discomfort ahead of her, but no fractures, nothing broken. At 1:15 in the morning, I gave my statement to a uniformed officer from the waiting room chair, walking him through the evening, start to finish, while Audrey sat next to me, and Aunt Loretta fetched bitter vending machine coffee that I got through without tasting a drop of it. The officer told me the incident qualified as aggravated battery with an enhanced charge under Illinois statute. The victim's documented physical disability triggered the elevation. Venue management is pulling the footage and securing it tonight, he said. They've been fully cooperative. Good, I said. At 2:47, my phone went off. Simone. I moved out to the hallway to take it. I just got an alert from the bank security system, she said. Her voice was flat and measured in the way it gets when she's been sitting with information and waiting for the right moment to deliver it. Between 11:41 and 12:19 tonight, 4 separate attempts were made to reach your primary account from a device we don't recognize. The system flagged the IP and locked the account on the 3rd attempt. Whoever was behind it tried a 4th time 6 minutes after the lockout, which means they had no idea the door had already been sealed. Vance, I said. The IP traced to a residential account in Vance Crowley's name. Simone walked me through the rest of it. He'd targeted the account during the span of time he would have assumed the reception was still running, probably figured the noise and distraction of a wedding would give him enough cover. Then a pause. Mr. Sheridan making access attempts against a frozen account that's already part of an active fraud investigation is not a small thing to add to someone's record. I'll have the investigator on the phone first thing tomorrow. After the call ended, I didn't move right away. I stood in that corridor and let the moment sit. The overhead fluorescence buzzed faintly. A night shift orderly pushed a cart past me, gave me a brief nod, kept going. I stood there thinking about Vance Crowley somewhere in this city, at 11:41, at night crouched in the dark over his phone, hammering in account numbers, while 200 people were busy posting video of his cousin's courtroom style unraveling onto the internet. I thought about every holiday table he'd ever sat, at how easy his laugh had been, how well he'd kept track of everyone's names. Not once, not a single moment had I thought to look closer. I walked back to the waiting room. Aunt Loretta had gone to sleep in one of the chairs, still in her plum-colored dress shoes, off her head dropped sideways against the wall. She looked so much like the girl she'd been at 16, conked out in the back seat on those endless family road trips, that something in my throat tightened. Audrey was awake, spine-straight, phone in both hands, wearing the expression she puts on when she's turning a problem over carefully in her mind. She glanced up the moment I stepped through the door. Simone called me too, she said, voice low. Vance went after the account tonight. I know. It's finished, Dad, Audrey said. Not triumphant, nothing like that. It came out the way it sounds when someone finally sets a heavy box down after hauling it up a long staircase. Whatever the legal process looks like from here, the essential thing is behind us. Mom is okay. The account's held. And roughly 200 people watched it happen. I dropped into the chair beside her. Is Fiona all right? I asked. Audrey took a moment before she answered. I texted her about an hour ago. She's at a hotel somewhere. A beat. She said she needs to think. That was the whole message. That's enough for tonight, I said. One last buzz before I let my eyes close. A text, no name attached, timestamp. 3:12 in the morning, Fiona. Dad, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. My thumbs moved slowly. My hands hadn't fully steadied yet. I know you didn't, sweetheart. Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. I laid the phone on my knee and tipped my head back against the wall. And for the first time in 6 weeks, the thing coiled tight inside my chest started slowly and carefully to let go. Fiona arrived at 7:15 in the morning. Jeans, a gray sweatshirt from DePaul University, the one she'd had since junior year, worn down to something soft and almost shapeless, which was entirely the wrong outfit for a woman who had been standing at an altar 12 hours before. Hair pulled back, no makeup, face bare. She looked both younger than 33 and older than 33, at once, the particular look of someone who has spent a night arriving at a decision they can't take back. I found her in the corridor outside Gloria's room. She pulled up short about 4 feet from me, and her chin lifted, the involuntary reflex she's had her whole life when she's on the edge of tears, and she said, "Is Mom awake?" "Since 6, I told her. "She's been asking for you." Fiona's lips pressed hard together. Her eyes filled. "Dad, I need you to know that I didn't—" "I know," I said. "Come on, she's waiting." We walked in together. Gloria was propped up in the bed, her left arm free where they'd pulled the IV an hour earlier, her communication device positioned on the adjustable table in front of her. Overnight, the bruising across her shoulder had deepened and spread into something I had to keep deliberately steering my eyes away from. But she was sitting straight, and her eyes were alert. When Fiona came through the doorway, Gloria's face changed, opened into something I'd been watching for 33 years. Whenever she looked at our daughters, a mother's particular brand of helpless softness, the kind that can be incandescent with anger at a situation and have absolutely none left over for the child standing in front of her. Fiona went straight to the bed, sat on the edge of it, gathered her mother's left hand in both of hers, and bent forward until her forehead was nearly touching their joined hands. Her shoulders moved. "Mom, I'm so sorry." She managed the words breaking apart as she said them. "I should have pushed harder. I should have asked. He told me you'd agreed to all of it, and I wanted so badly for that to be true that I let it go. Every time. I am so sorry." Gloria's hand stirred beneath Fiona's grip. With her free hand, she reached for the device, fingers tracing the screen with the deliberate care she'd spent months developing, and the synthesized voice filled the room. "You believed someone you loved. That is not a sin. That is just being human." Fiona raised her head. Her face was raw, streaked unmistakably her mother's. "He was lying from the very first conversation," she said. "I've been going back over all of it, every story, every answer he had ready, and I can trace exactly where the seams are now. Every moment I should have pushed back and didn't. Every time he steered us somewhere else so smoothly that I didn't even register the pivot." She shook her head slowly. "I got so absorbed in the wedding itself that I went blind to everything else." "And that's precisely what he needed," I said from the chair near the window. "That's how someone like Grant operates. He locates whatever has your full attention, and he turns it into a blind spot." Fiona looked over at me, something hardening along her jaw. "I'm filing for divorce," she said. "I called a lawyer this morning. 6:30 in the morning, I called a lawyer." A sound escaped her that was somewhere between a laugh and a ragged exhale. She was gracious about the time. "Good," I said. "And I want to testify," Fiona said. "Simone reached out to me last night. It was late by the time we finished talking. I was still at the hotel, and she walked me through what participation would actually involve. A written statement, possibly testimony, if the case went to trial. She held my gaze without flinching. "I want to do it. I want to sit across from them and tell them everything Grant said to me, every conversation, every story he fed me, all of it." "Fiona," I leaned toward her, "do you understand what you're committing to? You'd be testifying against your husband." "My soon-to-be ex-husband," she said. "And yes, I know exactly what it means." She turned back toward her mother. "He put Mom on the floor of her own daughter's wedding. He looked at the two of you and made a decision that you were already done, that you didn't count anymore." Something entered her voice that I hadn't heard there before. Not quite anger, the particular hard clarity of someone who has located exactly where they stand and planted their feet. "I want to look him in the face inside a courtroom and tell the truth. I think I've earned the right to do that." Gloria raised her left hand and extended it palm open toward Fiona. Fiona placed her hand in her mother's. The forensic audit landed on Simone's desk in the second week of December. She called on a Tuesday afternoon and read me the summary in her measured, unhurried way. 134 $134,000 pulled from our accounts across 16 months. Funneled through Mercer Home Solutions, LLC, distributed to wedding vendors, personal credit card balances. Grant's weekend hotel stays a set of kitchen appliances for the apartment Grant and Fiona had shared that Fiona had believed were a housewarming gift from his parents. The device logins were definitive. Every unauthorized transaction traced back to Grant's laptop or Vance's phone. The timestamps aligned with hours when my medical transport records and hospital sign-in sheets placed me at Rush Medical Center with Gloria. Grant had not simply stolen from us. He had constructed the paperwork to make it look like Audrey had done it, layering false memo fields and fabricated authorization notes into the record with the patience of a man who had been absolutely certain he'd never be caught. Vance Crowley was arrested on a Wednesday morning in early December. I didn't follow the news coverage. Simone called me as she always did without wasting words. Vance taken into custody, bail set, public defender assigned, preliminary hearing scheduled for January. 3 days after that, Grant was arrested at the apartment he'd moved into after Fiona changed the locks. I was at the stove making oatmeal when Simone called. I stood there and listened while she walked me through the charges. Felony embezzlement, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, aggravated battery, conspiracy to commit fraud. When she finished, I said, "Thank you." I set down the phone, finished the oatmeal, and carried the bowl into the living room where Gloria was watching the morning news. She looked up when I came in. Something in my face told her because her hand went straight to her device. "It's done," the synthesized voice asked. "The arrests," I said. "Both of them." She was quiet for a moment, then her finger moved again. "Good," the device said. "Now sit down. The oatmeal is getting cold." I sat down next to my wife, and outside the window, the first snow of December was beginning to fall on Riverside. Cook County Courthouse on California Avenue had a particular smell, lemon floor wax and old paper, and the specific institutional coffee that seems to exist only in government buildings, brewed at 6 in the morning and left on the burner until it thickens into something approaching tar. I wore the charcoal suit again. Gloria had insisted. The night before, she'd pointed at the garment bag hanging on the closet door, and then pointed at me, wearing the expression she reserved for decisions that had already been made and did not require my input. I hadn't argued. After 41 years together, I had a clear sense of which battles were worth entering, and this was not among them. We arrived at 8:45. Simone was waiting in the corridor outside the courtroom, composed and precise in a charcoal blazer, her legal pad already open. Audrey stood beside her. A few steps away, Fiona was in a simple gray dress, hair-loose hands clasped in front of her. No wedding jewelry, no carefully assembled bridal look, just my daughter looking more like herself than she had in longer than I could put a date to. She came to me first. She hugged me the way she had when she was small, both arms pulled tight around my neck. I held on and kept quiet because the two of us were past needing words for this. Then she crossed to her mother. She went down on one knee beside the wheelchair, right there in the courthouse hallway, with attorneys and clerks filing past on both sides, and she took Gloria's left hand and pressed it to her cheek. Gloria's fingers curved gently against her daughter's face. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. Grant was already in the courtroom when we entered. He sat at the defense table in a dark suit that didn't quite fit something borrowed or hurriedly bought without the tailoring of the tuxedo he'd worn at Harborview Pavilion. Vance was 2 seats down beside his own attorney, staring at the table in front of him with the fixed concentration of a man who has concluded that if he keeps his eyes down, he becomes harder to fully see. The plea agreements had been finalized the week before. Simone had taken me through the terms on a Thursday afternoon at her LaSalle Street office, spreading the documents across the walnut table with the same methodical care she'd applied to my bank statements 4 months earlier. Grant felony embezzlement, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, aggravated battery, mandatory restitution of the full $134,000, surrender of assets, the SUV, the savings account, the vendor refunds from the canceled wedding, permanent prohibition from serving as any person's financial representative, 18 months of active incarceration, the balance of a 3-year sentence suspended, followed by an extended period of supervised probation. Vance felony, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted unauthorized account access, mandatory restitution of his portion, $41,000 in LLC fees collected over 16 months, 18 months probation, full cooperation with the forensic audit as a condition of the agreement. "Any questions about the terms?" Simone had asked. "No," I said. "I think it's right." The courtroom settled into order. Gloria's wheelchair was positioned at the end of the front row, her communication device mounted and ready. Dr. Vera Novak sat to her left. Audrey was on my right. Fiona sat beside Audrey, hands folded in her lap, eyes straight ahead. When the judge called for the victim impact statement, I rose. I didn't walk to the podium on my own. I took my place beside Gloria's wheelchair, and she reached up and took hold of my hand, and I held the single page she had spent 3 therapy sessions composing with Dr. Novak's help, and I read it aloud into the stillness of that room. I won't set down every word of it here. Those words belong to her, but I'll tell you that she did not write about the money. She didn't write about the wedding, the venue, the forged authorization codes, the LLC shell, or any of the mechanisms Grant and Vance had used to dismantle what we had built across 40 years. She wrote about what it is to understand everything happening around you and have no way to say so. She wrote about watching her husband be deceived and feeling the words bottled up behind a wall she could not find a way through. She wrote about the specific cruelty of being treated as though awareness stops where speech stops, as though a mind that cannot form words aloud must not be forming them at all. She wrote, "I was always here. I was always listening. I always understood. You simply decided not to find out." When I finished, I folded the paper and stepped back. Gloria reached for her device. Her finger crossed the screen, one selecting a phrase she had prepared ahead of time, and the synthesized voice carried it clearly into the quiet room. "I am not a before picture. I am not a tragedy. I am Gloria Sheridan, and I am still here." Fiona made a sound beside Audrey, a sharp, small intake of breath, as though something had landed squarely in her chest. Audrey reached over and took her sister's hand without looking at her. Fiona gripped it hard. The judge accepted the plea. He read the sentences into the record with the measured, deliberate pace of someone who has performed this duty many times and carries an awareness of what each word weighs. When it was over, the courtroom clerk called for order, and Grant was led toward the holding area by 2 officers who handled him with the efficient, impersonal professionalism of people doing a job. He didn't glance at Fiona as he was led past. Fiona didn't look away. Out on the courthouse steps, the March air came off the lake, cold and sharp, the particular Chicago cold that finds the gap at your collar, no matter how carefully you've bundled up. Simone shook my hand and said she'd be in touch about the restitution schedule. Audrey held on to me in a hug, long enough that I understood she wasn't in any rush to release it. Aunt Loretta, who had made the drive up from Louisville a second time for the hearing, pressed a paper bag into my hands. Inside were 2 lemon poppy seed muffins from the place on Clark Street that Gloria had loved before she got sick. "She told me to bring them," Aunt Loretta said, tipping her head toward Gloria. "Of course she did," I said. 2 months on a Saturday evening in May, I made dinner. Nothing elaborate, no recipe pulled out. No occasion attached to it, no reservation required anywhere. Pasta with the vodka sauce I'd taught myself to cook during the long stretch of Gloria's first recovery, when having something to do with my hands kept my head from going somewhere darker. Garlic bread from the Italian bakery 2 blocks over. A green salad that leaned heavy on Roma tomatoes, the way Gloria preferred it. The dining room table was set for 4. Aunt Loretta arrived at 6:0 carrying a bottle of sparkling water, and the particular energy she always brings into a room, warm, alert, ready for whatever the evening turns into. Fiona came through the door 7 minutes later, slightly out of breath from the L ride over from her new apartment in Logan Square, the one she'd moved into in January, with 2 suitcases and a very clear accounting of what she was leaving behind and what she was stepping toward. She looked good. Not recovered. Recovery doesn't happen in 4 months, and anyone who tells you it does is selling something, but oriented. Moving in a direction she had picked out for herself. We ate. We talked about Fiona's new position, a project management role at a firm downtown she'd started in February. We talked about Audrey's promotion at the hospital, which had come through in January, and which she'd taken without the hesitation that might have given her pause a year earlier. We talked about Gloria's most recent therapy evaluation, in which Dr. Novak had noted measurable progress in her left side motor control, described in the notes as, quote, ahead of the projected curve. We didn't talk about the trial. We didn't talk about the sentencing. We didn't talk about Grant or Vance or Harborview Pavilion or any of it, because there was nothing left to say about any of it that hadn't already been said. After dinner, while Aunt Loretta was in the middle of a story about something that had happened at her book club in Louisville, something that had Audrey laughing hard enough that she had to set her fork down, I found myself watching Gloria instead. She was watching her daughters. Her eyes moved from Audrey to Fiona and back, and the expression on her face was the one I knew more intimately than any other. She had the quiet, uncomplicated satisfaction of a woman looking at something she built and finding it exactly right. Her finger moved on the device. The synthesized voice came through gently into the warm room, cutting a soft line through Aunt Loretta's story. "This is family." Aunt Loretta lifted her glass of sparkling water. "This is family." Audrey lifted hers. Fiona raised her eyes, bright chin up. I reached over and laid my hand over Gloria's left hand, and I raised my glass. Outside the window, the May evening was doing what May evenings in Chicago do when they choose to be generous, long and warm and golden. The kind of light that falls on everything and makes it look as though it was always meant to be exactly where it is. That May evening, with the light coming gold through the window and Gloria's hand under mine and our daughters around the table, that was what we had been fighting toward. Not the verdict, not the restitution. This. I won't tell you it was easy to get there. There were months when the grief and the anger and the sheer exhaustion of it sat on my chest like something physical. What this season cost us in trust and time, in the innocence of believing the people closest to you mean you well, that cost was real. But I believe God does not waste suffering. I believe the Lord's timing is not our timing, and that what looks like devastation can over years reveal itself as the thing that brought you back to what mattered. These grandpa revenge stories are not really about revenge at all. They are about love defending itself. They are father stories, stories about a man refusing to let what he built for his family be taken without a fight. So here is what I'd leave with you. Trust your instincts when something doesn't add up. Asking one more question is never the wrong choice. Document everything. Kindness does not require naivety, and protecting yourself is not the same as suspicion. If someone you love cannot speak for themselves, lean in closer, not away. Their silence is not absence. And when it is over, when the hard season finally turns, let yourself sit at the table. Let yourself raise the glass. You earn that too. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to Grandpa's Revenge. There are more stories here that deserve to be told. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.